Okay, welcome back. So, in the last chapter, we kind of talked about the beginnings of Krakatoa, and here we're just going to continue on and talk about defining the look and kind of using some of the shading settings here in Krakatoa. So, I went ahead and I rolled to frame 88, and I added a few more particles, and then I cached out a frame. Let's see here. And I also did the color of the particles just a little bit, so that now we have kind of more of a sand tornado kind of thing going on. So let's get to another angle. We'll render another frame. So you can see it looks really cool. Like, you can get this kind of dusty look really quickly. I mean, that rendered super fast, and so we can change a lot of the settings. So you have density, which is kind of the thickness. So if you change this to 10, you notice we'll get a thicker mass, and it's going to impede the shadowing and stuff like that. So I find the really way to get good looks with Krakatoa is to turn this density down. Keep this low, keep it as low as you can. And that's really why you need a lot of particles, because you can see as you lower this, you just really start to lose your volume. And it looks nice here because there's more particles here, because that stuff is there's a lot of fume down there, and it started birthing there, and it's only birthing up here now. So it's less dense, and that's why you need a ton of particles getting cached out. So one thing that's also making this look so thin is this density exponent, which is kind of related to the overall density of the particle and like the camera distance. So you can see I'll go down to -1, and it'll go from being this horrible mass to suddenly looking thinner and nicer, and then we can bring it down again. You can see how this is really taking down the density of your particles. So then it's a way to get nice fine tuning. So this is how you can get really good sand and stuff. Like, you can bring this back up to 6. Render again, still too thick. Let's go -3. So it's kind of like a battle between getting the right density exponent and final pass density. And you can get the same look just by going to like -1 and typing, or even going to 0 and just typing a number in, like 0.01. But it's a slightly different formula for calculating the density, so I think it looks more interesting. But you can see that's pretty cool too. It looks really similar. So then you can use self-shadowing, and this is going to override the basic shadow settings and let you control the shadows on a similar level as the point density. So now this is another way of getting really, really nice sand, where you can start to get that fineness to it, where a lot of the light's being absorbed, and it's with this exponent. So maybe we'll bring the shadows up just a little bit, 8.5 or so. Let's see how that looks. Getting a little dark, I feel like sand's very light. It would let a lot of light pass through it. So I don't think I brought it down that much, but let's try 3, 6. Now we've really got this kind of sand going on, and it's got a little bit of shadowing, but it's very light. It feels really light and airy. You can override things like override the color. Now we'll have kind of red sand, and you can apply texture maps through here and do all kinds of neat stuff. We can make this a slightly less atrocious color, and then you have other options up there like absorption, and yeah, you've got emission, absorption. So emission's just gonna kind of like be an ambient light. Absorption takes the light and kind of distorts the value, and you can override the density with like a texture map here, which is cool, So that's kind of the settings for. There's a lot of deeper options too if you want to go to the next level of this. You've got additive mode, and that's how you can get a lot of cool kind of abstract style effects. And there's environment reflections, which people have done some great stuff with getting water using those, which is really neat. And yeah, I mean, you saw G.I. Joe. This was all this stuff, and it was made for that movie, and it looks really good. So that's kind of all the Krakatoa rendering stuff we're going to cover, because that's really all you need to make these passes. I guess there is one more thing, that's motion blur, which is awesome here. So now we'll turn on motion blur. You'll notice this is what makes it look awesome. So turn on, as many samples as you can afford in the particle segments here, and always turn on this jittered motion blur, and that'll give you a really nice visual result. You can see it's going through and calculating each sample and then kind of adding it to each other. So that's how you get the motion blur here. And it can do depth of field as well, which is really nice, and it's pretty quick. Sometimes when you're loading big files to disk, you can see that's just so nice. Like there's some really nice motion in there. And actually, let's get closer so we can really see some of the detail in the particle motion. And these renders are just always very, very fun and pretty to look at. Like it's one of the most enjoyable moments is when you're messing with your Krakatoa stuff, because it just always comes out looking so cool, and it's so satisfying. I don't know. But what we'll cover after this is kind of the partitioning workflow and how to generate a ton of particles, and that's how you can get some really, really cool images like this, but way denser. So you can see the motion blur adds a lot. That really starts to sell the motion. But you see this look I'm talking about here? You get these kind of distinct lines, and while it looks cool in a still, in motion it actually doesn't look as cool. So let's check out some of the partitioning, right? So just to make sure you can see that, got this Krakatoa thing up here. There's a lot of options here. That's where you do all that PRT stuff and loading in the Fume volume objects, and there's the KCM modifier for making kind of shader stuff. But let's go here, just in the basic window. If we go down to the bottom, there's a section for partitioning. Let's kind of minimize some of this stuff. Shader params, main controls. So yeah, we've got save particles, which is just if you want to cache one particle, and then the partitioning here, where you can set the settings for that. So let's give it a location, a path. So let's see. I have a little Krakatoa section set up, or I used to. Here, Krakatoa. Tornado 1, we'll call this DT partitions. Okay, and then it's just going to dump them all here. So we'll call this Tornado 01. All right. Now it's got all this location. You can choose which things you want to bake in. You can bake a lot of stuff: the absorption, eccentricity, specular power, texture coordinates, lifespan. I mean, you can bake the lifespan into the particles. It's really, really cool, especially when you realize that this kind of data moves around with these files, and that can be really interesting. If you're good at scripting or whatever, you can access this stuff and use it in other programs, and that has a lot of power. Now here in the partition range, this is how many partitions. So we want 100 partitions. Great. We want 10. Let's do 5 partitions of this, and you can see this is how the partition range we're going to do. I'm just going to do this locally. We'll just do 5 partitions, and this is how the partitioning works basically. So you've got these seed values. You might have noticed that most of the particle flow operators have a seed. So at the bottom, you've got this seed here. And you can always hit new, and you'll get a new result. See, it's calculating these particles, and they'll always look different, because basically all of these things are based on they're not totally random. They're based on random numbers at the end of the day, but it's always coming from some seed value somewhere in some function. And this is just changing that. It's pretty cool. So it's a clever idea that's really simple. And so actually, something I've thought about doing for a long time is, I mean, you can implement this in Maya like right now. I mean, if you just change the seed value on your particles and like use a script to write them to disk, I mean, that would be, you could generate a ton of particles just like this. So yeah, this is going to tell you what it's going to seed values on. So like pflow speed, rotation. Maybe you don't want these seeded for some reason, And I believe you can also type no seed, or maybe that's thinking particles. You can even partition other Krakatoa objects, which is cool. So you can increment those seeds. And now we're just gonna kind of cache 5 partitions to disk, so we can do generate partition range locally. 2 frame 0 only. Oh, see, look, it's cool. It even reminds when you forget stuff. That's so nice. Click no to use current scene range of 0 to 100. Let's actually change that for real, so that you guys know what to do. Save particles to file sequence, right? Here, if you right-click it, you get access to all this stuff. So you can choose active segment down here, custom range, custom frames, and that'll take stuff from your render settings. So we're just going to use the active sequence here. Then we'll click Save Part, Generate All Partitions Ran Locally. Okay, and it's going through and saving the particles for each of these frames. So then it takes a little bit of time, but you end up with a ton of particles. So I'm going to generate this, and I'll get back to you.